Please don't move! The woman behind her hissed at the DMV counter. The digital number above the glass flickered, then froze. Emma's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse as it slid off her shoulder and dropped against the plastic chair beside her. The chair scraped softly when someone nudged it with a shoe. Emma shifted her foot, pinning one metal leg to the linoleum. Her son sat cross-legged on the floor, rolling a red toy car back and forth along the crack between tiles. The wheels clicked. He paused, listening. Somewhere to the left, a printer whined. A cough broke into the room and stopped abruptly. "Ma'am," the clerk said without looking up. Emma didn't answer. She watched the narrow hallway to the restrooms, the swinging door settling, then lifting again as a man slipped through, pale, hand braced against the wall. He didn't look back. The door closed. The line breathed in as one. The woman behind Emma leaned closer. "If he's gone, you lose the spot." Emma pressed her purse harder into the chair, leather creasing. Her son looked up, eyebrows raised, the car suspended in his hand. She shook her head once, small, almost invisible. The digital number blinked. A toddler cried near the exit and was hushed. Shoes squeaked. Someone laughed too loudly, then stopped. Emma felt heat creep up her neck. The chair wobbled as another foot tapped it. She didn't move. The restroom door opened. The man stepped out, wiping his hands on his jeans, eyes scanning the room like he dropped something fragile. When he saw the chair still there, his shoulders sagged a fraction. He mouthed something. Emma couldn't hear it over the hum, but his hand lifted, uncertain. The clerk cleared her throat. "Next." Emma slid the chair forward with her knee. The toy car clattered from her son's hand and skidded under the counter. No one bent to pick it up. Emma learned long ago how to take up as little space as possible. She stood slightly to the side of rooms, kept her voice even, her eyes lowered just enough to avoid invitation. Lines unsettled her, not because of the waiting, but because waiting meant being seen. Counted. Judged by numbers she didn't choose. Paperwork had a way of shrinking her, reducing her life to boxes and signatures that never quite told the truth. Today, she was 32, a single mother with a calm face people mistook for strength. She folded forms neatly, stacked receipts by date, answered questions with practiced clarity. Inside, there was a constant tightening, a quiet fear that one mistake, one wrong word, one missed line, could unravel everything she'd held together. She didn't talk about the past. Not the years where decisions were made for her. Not the time she'd learned that asking too much meant losing more. Her son was the only place she allowed herself to be fully present. With him, she watched. Listened. Let silence stretch without rushing to fill it. She avoided imagining futures that felt too big to hold. Hope, she'd learned, could be careless. It wandered in without permission and left a mess behind. Places like the DMV brought all of that to the surface. The fluorescent lights. The clipped voices. The sense that lives were paused, suspended in rows of plastic chairs. Emma focused on small things, the weight of her purse, the sound of her son's toy car, to keep herself anchored. Control lived in details. If you've ever felt that tightening in your chest while standing still, unsure if staying quiet is protection or surrender, you already know Emma more than you think. Stories like this don't announce themselves loudly. They unfold in moments people barely notice. And sometimes, staying with them, really staying, is the only way to see what they leave behind. Emma didn't know it yet, but the choice she just made wasn't finished with her. And neither was the line. The man hesitated at the edge of the line, shifting his weight as if his body had betrayed him mid-thought. His face had gone a thin gray, eyes unfocused, one hand already lifting an apology. "Restroom," he said, not to anyone in particular. The people around him barely reacted. A woman checked her phone. Someone sighed. The digital number above the counter advanced with a soft chime, indifferent. Emma saw the chair before she thought about it. Empty. Still warm. The man's folder lay on the seat, paper slightly fanned, a quarter bent where his fingers had gripped too tightly. He stepped away, faster now, his footsteps uneven as he pushed through the swinging door. The space opened immediately. A man behind him took half a step forward. The woman from earlier adjusted her bag, eyes already claiming the gap. Emma felt the familiar pull. Don't get involved. It was easier to let lines correct themselves. Easier to pretend she hadn't noticed. Easier to keep her head down and wait her turn, whatever that meant. Her son looked up at her, then at the empty chair. He didn't speak. He just held his toy car still, as if waiting for instruction. "Ma'am?" the clerk called again. Emma slid her purse onto the chair. The leather sagged into the plastic, unmistakable. She didn't announce it. She didn't explain. She simply placed it there, and nudged the chair back into line with her foot. "That spot's taken," the woman behind her muttered. Emma nodded once, a small, non-confrontational gesture, as if agreeing to something else entirely. Her heart beat harder than the moment required. She adjusted the strap of her purse, anchoring it with her hand, feeling the weight of everything inside. The restroom door closed with a hollow click. Nothing else happened. No argument. No raised voices. The line settled, reshaping itself around the chair Emma now guarded. She told herself it was temporary. A minute, maybe two. A courtesy so small it barely counted as a choice at all. But even then, with her eyes fixed on the floor and her shoulders drawn in, Emma felt it, the quiet certainty that once a place is held, something else is already moving. The first time Emma saw him again, she almost didn't recognize him outside the context of the line. Without the plastic chair and the numbered screen above his head, he looked smaller, folded into himself on the concrete steps of the DMV. He sat with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped, staring at a point just beyond the parking lot as if waiting for something to return on its own. Emma told herself it was coincidence. The building emptied slowly, people spilling out in uneven bursts, paperwork tucked under arms. She guided her son down the steps, careful of the chipped edges. He immediately began kicking pebbles into the gutter, aiming for the narrow opening where water disappeared after rain. The man didn't look up. Not at first. They crossed paths again 2 days later. Same steps. Same posture. This time, Emma noticed the crease in his jacket sleeves, the way he rubbed his thumb over the edge of a folded envelope. She slowed without meaning to. Her son's sneaker scraped loudly, as he missed a kick, and the pebbles skittered across the pavement, stopping near the man's shoe. "I can get it," the man said, voice low. He nudged the pebble back with the toe of his boot. "Thank you," Emma replied too quickly. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Not long enough to exchange anything real. Long enough to acknowledge memory. He nodded once, restrained, as if careful not to assume familiarity. After that, the pattern settled in. Emma came to the DMV twice more, always at different times, always for different reasons. And each time, the man was there, sometimes sitting, sometimes standing, sometimes pacing the edge of the steps like he couldn't decide whether to stay or leave. They never spoke more than a sentence. A greeting. A thank you. A shared look when someone slammed the door too hard. Her son began to expect him. He kicked pebbles in wider arcs now, testing distances, glancing back to see if the man was watching. Once, when Emma was distracted by a phone call, her son wandered too close to the parking lot. A horn blared. The man stood without hesitation, stepping between the child and the street, one hand lifted in a silent stop. Nothing dramatic followed. No lecture. No thanks exchanged beyond a nod. But something shifted. Emma felt it in the way silence stretched between them. Not awkward, not empty. Watchful. She caught herself adjusting her pace to match his, waiting an extra moment before guiding her son away. She didn't know why. Trust grew in these pauses, in the absence of demands. Still, she guarded herself. She knew how fragile routines could be. On the fifth visit, the steps were empty. Her son stopped mid-kick, scanning the concrete. "Where's the man?" he asked. Emma didn't answer right away. She looked toward the glass doors, then down the sidewalk, her chest tightening with an unease she hadn't prepared for, because absence, she was realizing, could carry as much weight as presence. The toy car slipped from her son's hand without warning, skidding across the parking lot in a crooked line before disappearing beneath a parked sedan. It stopped somewhere near the shadow of the tire. Her son froze, then crouched, peering into the dark space as if the car might roll back on its own. "Careful," Emma said, already stepping closer. The pavement was warm, radiating through the thin soles of her shoes. Cars idled and moved in slow, impatient arcs. She knelt, reaching under the sedan, her fingers brushing dust and grit, but the car sat just beyond her reach. "I can't get it," her son said, voice tight, not crying yet, but close. Before Emma could answer, a shadow crossed the ground beside them. The man crouched down without a word. He lay flat against the asphalt, one arm sliding easily under the car. His fingers closed around the red plastic, and he rolled back, pushing himself up with a small grunt. He wiped the car on his jeans and held it out. Her son took it carefully, as if it might disappear again. He pressed it to his chest for a second before setting it down and rolling it back and forth near the man's shoe. The man didn't move away. He stayed where he was, grounded, watching the car's path as if it mattered. Emma noticed the scrape on his knuckle, fresh and red. He noticed her noticing and tucked his hand into his pocket. They exchanged nothing else. From that day on, small accommodations began to form between them. The man stood closer to the curb when her son played near the parking lot. Emma lingered longer on the steps when she saw him there, pretending to check her phone. Sometimes they sat in silence, the glass doors opening and closing behind them, the hum of the building steady and unchanging. Her son started leaving the car near the man's foot on purpose, pushing it just far enough that it would bump his shoe. The man would nudge it back with care, rolling it along the ground instead of kicking it away. Once, he fixed the loose wheel with a gentle twist, testing it before handing it back. Emma felt the shift inside herself before she named it. She found herself looking for him first when they arrived, measuring the day by whether he was there. She trusted the quiet consistency of his presence, the way he never asked questions, never explained himself. It reminded her of something she'd lost, safety without obligation. Still, she held part of herself back. She knew how quickly patterns could break. She had learned to expect it. One afternoon, as they prepared to leave, her son darted ahead, the car slipping again from his grip. It rolled farther this time, stopping near the front wheel of a different sedan. Emma straightened, scanning the lot, and saw the man still kneeling where they'd left him, his gaze fixed on the glass doors of the DMV, waiting for something that hadn't come. And as Emma watched him rise slowly to his feet, she realized she didn't know what he was waiting for, but she feared, suddenly and sharply, that when it arrived, it would take him away. Emma wasn't meant to hear it. The words slipped past her the way paperwork often did, casual, clipped, meant only for someone behind a counter. She had stepped back inside the DMV to ask a question about a missing form, her son lingering near the water fountain, tracing circles on the tile with the toe of his shoe. Two clerks stood near the side desk, their voices lowered but not careful. "Case number ended as a no-show," one of them said, tapping a keyboard. "License suspension hearing. Third time, I think. Yeah, the other replied. He was scheduled. Didn't check in. Emma stopped walking. The name wasn't spoken, but she didn't need it. She saw the chair, the folded envelope, the way the man had scanned the room when he came back from the restroom, searching not for a number, but for permission to exist where he'd left off. Her son looked up at her, sensing the stillness. Mom? She nodded without answering, her eyes fixed on the counter. The clerk continued typing, already moving on, already done. Emma stepped back outside slowly. The man was on the steps again, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight enough to blanch his knuckles. The envelope lay open beside him now. Papers peeked out, edges curled from being folded and unfolded too many times. She sat down one step above him. Not beside. Not yet. The memory rearranged itself inside her. The way he never rushed her. The way he stayed even when there was nothing left to wait for. The patience that had felt steady now looked like resignation. He hadn't been lingering. He had been stuck. Her son slid down the steps, settling 2 steps below the man. He rolled his car once, then twice, before it stopped near the man's shoe. The man didn't nudge it back this time. He just stared at it, unmoving. Emma watched his shoulders rise and fall. Watched the way he held himself, as if bracing for something permanent. He was here, her son said suddenly, looking up at Emma. That day. In the line. Emma swallowed. Yes, she said. He was. The man glanced back, startled, as if he'd forgotten they could hear him. Emma met his eyes then, fully, without flinching. She didn't ask questions. She didn't apologize. She let the truth sit between them, unspoken but understood. He looked away first. Inside, something hardened and softened at the same time. Emma thought of all the times she'd been marked absent while standing right there. Of moments that passed her by because she hadn't known how to insist she existed. The doors opened behind them. A clerk called a number. Life continued indifferent. Emma stood. She didn't know yet what she was going to do. She only knew that the line hadn't ended when the hearing did, and that the man on the steps wasn't finished waiting. As she turned back toward the glass doors, her son rose too, gripping his toy car, following her without being asked. Emma pushed the glass door open with her shoulder, the familiar rush of conditioned air brushing her face. The DMV looked the same as it always did, rows of chairs, the dull glow of screens, the low murmur of impatience, but something in her had shifted. She no longer moved along the edges. She walked straight to the ticket machine. Her hand hovered for a second, the old instinct rising, don't draw attention, don't complicate things. Then she pressed the button. The printer chirped and spat out a small white slip. The number was higher than the one glowing above the counter. It didn't matter. Her son stood a few steps behind her, clutching his toy car, watching with a seriousness that made her chest tighten. She folded the ticket once, then again, creasing it carefully, as if shaping the decision itself. Outside, the man hadn't moved. He sat exactly where she'd left him, eyes fixed on the parking lot, as if measuring how long someone could wait before time made the choice for them. He looked up when the door opened, surprise flickering across his face. Emma stopped in front of him. She didn't smile. She didn't explain. She held out the ticket. He stared at it, then at her, confusion clouding his features. His mouth opened, then closed. He shook his head once, reflexive. "It's yours," she said quietly. She placed the ticket in his hand before he could refuse, closing his fingers around it with a gentleness that felt deliberate. He looked down at the number, then back up at her, something raw and unguarded passing through his eyes. Her son stepped closer, the car rolling from his fingers to rest against the man's shoe. This time, the man nudged it back, slower than before, as if grounding himself. Emma turned and went back inside. The waiting room pressed in on her as she took a seat, her purse resting on her lap. She felt exposed without the ticket, strangely lighter and heavier all at once. The digital screen advanced. Numbers were called. People shifted. She waited. Outside, through the glass, she saw the man hesitate, then stand. He walked to the door, pausing as if expecting someone to stop him. No one did. He entered, holding the ticket like something fragile. Emma didn't look at him when he passed. She stared at the floor, counting the seams in the tile. Her heart beat unevenly, but she stayed still. The clerk called the number. The man stepped forward. Emma exhaled slowly, only then realizing she'd been holding her breath. Her son leaned against her side, warm and solid. She rested her hand on his head, fingers threading briefly through his hair. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew that for the first time in a long while, she hadn't chosen silence. And as the glass door closed behind the man, Emma felt the weight of that choice settle, not loud, not dramatic, but real enough to follow her wherever she went next. Months passed without announcement. Seasons shifted quietly, marked by different jackets, and the way light fell across the DMV parking lot. Emma stopped counting the days since that afternoon, stopped replaying the moment she handed over the ticket. Life filled the space in between the way it always did: school mornings, folded laundry, forms completed and set aside. One afternoon, Emma stood at the curb outside the DMV, her son beside her, both waiting for the pedestrian signal to change. He traced the grooves in the concrete with the wheels of his toy car, humming to himself. The building behind them looked unchanged, its glass reflecting the slow movement of traffic. A car rolled past the entrance, then slowed. Emma recognized it not by the make or the color, but by the way it paused, just long enough to matter. The man sat behind the wheel, hands steady, posture different than before. He glanced toward the steps, then toward the crosswalk. Their eyes met. He lifted his chin in a small nod. Not gratitude. Not explanation. Just acknowledgement. Emma nodded back, just as small. The light changed. She and her son crossed the street together, their shadows stretching ahead of them. The car continued on, merging into traffic without hurry. Her son looked up at her. "That was him," he said, certain. "Yes," Emma replied. He pushed the car forward, watching it roll over the painted line, then picked it up again. There was no urgency in his movements. No question left hanging. Emma felt the quiet settle around her, not empty, not heavy. Familiar. She hadn't gained anything she could point to. No papers stamped. No promises made. But something had aligned itself inside her, a sense that she could step forward when it mattered. If you're still here, still walking with her through ordinary places, maybe you know that feeling too, the calm that comes from choosing differently once and letting that be enough. Some stories don't end with changes you can see. They end with the knowledge that when the moment comes again, you won't look away. Emma squeezed her son's hand as they reached the other side. They didn't hurry. They didn't need to.